So we're going to turn to Britain now and go to more cursing in Britain. Not from the Islington Canal, though. From the Bards of Bath. And we're delighted to have Mr. Clews, who is the manager of the Roman Baths and the pump room at Baths. It's been, and has been for some time, it's been a very good year from down in Bath. There was, a few years ago, there was the extraordinary find of the so-called Bow Street hoard of almost 18,000 Roman coins, and with a grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund, they were able to purchase those, and they went on display yesterday. You said yesterday is the start of the display. And then also, the other thing that happened last year was that the Bath curse tablets at Bath, of which there are some 130, it was petitioned and they were inscribed on the UNESCO UK Memory of the World Register of Outstanding Documentary Heritage, and are the first documents from Britain to be so inscribed, along with other things like the Domesday Book and the Shakespeare Papers and so on. So anyway, it's our pleasure to, this evening to have Stephen talking to us about the curse tablets from Bath, messages to the goddess revealed, private thoughts of ordinary people. Hear all about it. We're waiting.
Well, thank you very much, Dominic, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The curse tablets from Bath, number 130, which makes them the largest single, certainly fully published group from Britain. Many of you will know of the Ely tablets from the temple in Gloucestershire. The Ely tablets have been partially published. There are 87 that have writing on, but altogether there are 140 that could match the description of a curse tablet. It's just that 53 of them are blank. And there are some of the tablets from Bath that have nothing written on them. What I'm going to be talking about is something that you'll see as I go through it is quite different in character to what Esther has been talking about. And we're moving on quite a long way in time here. In terms of date, we're probably looking at roughly the 2nd to the 4th century AD, and the focus of these tablets is rather different. They do wish terrible things on other people, but the motivation for wishing terrible things on other people is rather different to what Esther has described. In fact, people only really wish terrible things on other people, it seems, on these tablets, if they themselves have suffered some sort of misfortune. And actually what they're seeking is the righting of some wrong that has befallen them. And they would like the miscreant to be punished, and as it's usually the wrong that's befallen them is one of theft, and they want to see the property recovered. But they don't always actually want it for themselves. They're quite content, or they appear to be content from what they say, for the benefit of the recovery to go not to them but to the goddess. So it's really justice that they're after here. Something's gone wrong, they don't like it, and they want the goddess to sort it out and to punish the miscreant. So, just to look at where we are, this is a reconstruction drawing of Roman Bath, and the spring lies at the very heart of this complex just here, and it is set there, as you can see in that reconstruction drawing, in the corner of the precinct of the temple. And then ranging to the south is the bathhouse adjacent to it. So a very close relationship between the two. That same hot water that is rising from the spring is going on to feed the bathhouse. So by implication, if you're bathing within the baths, you're benefiting from water that in a sense is holy. But when the site was first developed, it wasn't on quite such a grand scale as this, and indeed the spring was originally an open pool within the corner of the temple precinct, and the bathhouse wasn't so big. It was all on a humbler scale. But to look at the spring today, it looks like this, or certainly this evening. It's closely encroached upon by later buildings. But going back to what the interior of that Roman building may possibly have looked like, we're probably looking at something like this. Once the enclosure building was put over it, access to that spring was restricted. And there were places where you could look through from the baths on this side over here through some windows, and there was also a door on the other side coming directly in from the temple precinct. And when access to a space is restricted, one of the effects of that is to give it a special status of some kind, and that's probably what's going on here. By enclosing the space, they would have probably restricted access perhaps to certain functionaries, and created a different feel, a different look and feel to that space. Probably made it an altogether darker, more mysterious kind of setting. And so this is the space into which the 130 cursed tablets were thrown. Now, the first of those was found in excavations in 1878, 1879. And these were undertaken by Major Charles Davis, who was the city architect and engineer. And one of his routine tasks, well, I say routine tasks, a task that occupied him for many years, was maintaining and developing the spa facilities in the city. And at that time, the spring had been turned into a bath directly over the Roman spring. So you have the original Roman spring chamber with a medieval bath built directly on top, with the water coming up from underneath. And this shows what happened when he removed the floor. The reason he removed the floor was that he was trying to respond to issues that he believed were due to water leaking from the reservoir, from the Roman reservoir. And it was during these investigations, in fact, that he discovered the Great Bath in Bath. But when doing this work to the spring, he also recovered some antiquities. I think to call it excavation is probably not, it's using a word in a way we wouldn't understand it today, but he did recover some things from the deposits, and perhaps almost like a sort of superficial trawl, and it did include 2 curse tablets. This is Davis. I should say, by the way, that he did have an interest in antiquities. He was the local branch secretary of the Society of Antiquaries. But having discovered 2 curse tablets, he clearly regarded them as outside his competence to deal with, and a photograph was sent to Professor Zangermeister, who was a professor of philology in Heidelberg, and probably the leading person of the day, or one of the leading people of the day, who might be able to pass an opinion on these things. And he was sent images of one of the two curses, which he translated, and it's since become known as the Vilbia curse, and of all the Roman curse tablets from Bath is probably the most famous. What it does, it's someone who is seeking redress for the theft of Vilbiam, or Vilbia, and we're not quite sure what Vilbia is. He thought it might be something that would translate as a tablecloth or a napkin. Others have said, well, it sounds like a female name. It's also been pointed out, well, perhaps it's just a misspelling of perhaps fibula, like in some way. But whatever Vilbia is, he asks that the person who has stolen it should become as liquid as water. And of course the curse itself has been thrown into water. So there may be a sort of element of sympathetic magic there. But he actually lists 18 people who may have been involved in the theft of Vilbia. They include both males and females. So if Vilbia is a woman, and this is someone whose heart has been stolen, so to speak, then it does sound a bit implausible. However, of course, in the ancient world, if it was a slave, then a woman could indeed just be a piece of property, in which case that could actually be quite a good fit for the way the curse works. After Davis's investigations, the spring was next investigated again by Barry Cunliffe in 1979 and 1980, 100 years later. And this was a much better conducted excavation, and many of the deposits were carefully sifted through to recover finds from the spring. But not everything was excavated. And indeed, as you can see in this image, there is quite a substantial bank of material here. And to this day, that remains unexcavated. So the 130 curses recovered from the spring are almost certainly not the full story. There will be more down there. That excavation took place under rather odd circumstances. People had to wear protective clothing because of a bug that was present in the Bath water. And in this image you can see towards the top, those dark marks are the oak piles that were driven into the mud to stabilise the area of the spring before the reservoir wall was built. And then you can see the sieving process taking place down below. A lot of things were found. 12,500 coins, that's the dominant thing, but also pottery, candlestick, jug. The mask is a tin mask. It actually comes from the drain just immediately outside outside the spring. But also some other things, possibly some ivory breasts, and fibula, sort of miniature bolt from catapult. All sorts of strange things seems to have ended up in the spring. But this drawing shows the extent that has been excavated. And you can see this dotted line here, running along there. And it's the area to the south of that that's been excavated. So altogether, it's only just over half that has been explored. Today, those tablets are displayed in the museum. Here's one set, there's another set also, and with various elements of interpretation there. But here are a few statistics about them. 130 altogether, a few unopened, some uninscribed. Some have illiterate markings. 29 are written in capital letters, 18 in New Roman cursive, which kicks in about 275 AD, and 64 in Old Roman cursive. If you add up the total number of words on them, you come to around 500, and there's 159 different names included on the curses, very often because they do include lists of names of people who are considered to be suspects in the crime, as I mentioned with the Vilbia curse. Some have nail holes, they've been literally nailed. This one has a nail hole, and it also just has one fragmentary piece of text: "May their life be weakened." So whatever they've done, that's what the person is seeking. Some are folded here. These are some example of folded ones. This is the sort of implement that might be used. We don't actually have a stylus from the spring, but this example's from Vindolanda. The script itself, in Roger Tomlin's study, he produced these analytical tables showing all the letters as they're found in the curses. The capitals, the Old Roman cursive and the New Roman cursive. In fact, there is another page of Old Roman cursive letters. But once you start to break it down like that, it just becomes easier to try and read and analyse them. When we look at the kind of things that they're talking about, this one refers to the theft of a bathing tunic. Well, Romans didn't really wear bathing costumes as we think of, but they did have a kind of tunic that probably they would wear under their cloak to go to and from the bathhouse, and that's probably what this bathing tunic means here. This is something slightly different. It's a sanction against perjury, and it's the only curse that deals with perjury. But they are known from other parts of the empire. In this case, we're told that an oath is taken at the spring on the 12th of April, but we don't know which year, because it would have been obvious to everyone concerned which year it was, I suppose. They would have known, so why put it? But a sanction against perjury is an interesting thing to see, just because it's anomalous, really. It is the only one from Britain. Some pools are sometimes described as perhaps seething pools. They're places where if something, a test can be carried out to test whether someone has perjured or not. So Salinas tells us that in Sardinia there was a place where people could bathe their eyes in the hot waters of the spring, and if they had committed perjury, they would go blind, but if they had not, then they would be fine. At another site in Sicily, something was, an oath was inscribed and thrown into the water. If it floated, the person had committed perjury. If it sank, if it floated, they had not committed perjury. If it sank, they had. That could be a bit hazardous with a lead curse, of course. This is what the new Roman cursive looks like. I'm not going to attempt to lead you through it. The letter forms do take a lot of looking at to appreciate and to understand. This is an unusual item. It's a small pewter plate. It's got a list of names on it, nothing more, and it was folded and thrown into the spring. The great majority of the tablets have been folded in some way, so there's an element of secrecy about what's going on. These aren't for public display, these documents, it seems. There's no real evidence for anything. Well, there's possibly one where there are a couple of nail holes that could have been to post it up somewhere, but for the greater part, that doesn't seem to be the intention. These are the private thoughts of individuals, the private wishes of people that are being sent into the spring for the attention of the goddess only. This one refers to the theft of a silver ring. And we see here that the lady who's had it stolen gives it to the temple of Mars. Interesting that it's Mars and not the resident deity Sulis Minerva. But she's happily giving this to the temple. But asks that whoever has stolen it should be accursed in his blood and eyes and every limb, or even have all of his intestines quite eaten away. If had either stolen it or just been involved with the process in some way. And this is something different again. This is become known as the Celtic curse. We don't know what it says because there are very few words that survive from Britain in the Celtic language, and most of them are on this tablet. There is another tablet from the Baths that possibly has some Celtic names on it. But at present there isn't a sufficient corpus of words that may be Celtic to allow us to begin to understand what the content of this might be. One or two of the words may be names, but we don't know. And but if we go abroad, if we go to Gaul, we can find that there the local language is being written down on cursed tablets. Here's the tablet from Chamalier, and the sufficient text is surviving there, and with sufficient familiarity to be able to start to suggest an interpretation for it. And the Larzac tablet, found in the 1980s, has 160 words on it. So you're starting to build up here quite a big corpus of words that once you get a bigger corpus, then you've got a better chance of being able to tackle interpretation, and particularly where documents may be written in more than one language. This is believed to refer to a curse against a group of women, possibly sorceresses. More recently, just 2 or 3 years ago, from the site of Les Jacobins at Le Mans, some more curses have come to light, again appear quite possibly written in Gaulish. So certainly on the continent, the practice of writing in the local language using Latin characters seems to have been taking place, and so this makes one think that perhaps it may just be the chance of survival that we actually only have one, and terribly fragmentary at that, using the local language here in a curse. Indeed, it may be that that is not British. It may be that it is Celtic from a different part of the Celtic world. Moving on, Esther mentioned where curses are found, watery places. It is certainly true of this one, from Hambley on the Solent, on the estuary there near the Solent, dedicated to Neptune, discovered on the beach. Where better to throw a curse intended for the intention of Lord Neptune? But there are two other curses from Britain dedicated to Neptune, and they also from watery places. But not just watery places, but also temple sites is where they're found. The ones from Le Mans were near a temple site. This from Bath, a different tack again, is one that's also attracted a lot of attention. It does look a bit like a moonscape here because of the corrosion effect on the curse, and they're not all in brilliant condition. But this is the one that's acquired the subtitle of the Christian curse. It's actually a curse about someone who's had 6 silver coins stolen. And in it, they you can see a close-up of the lettering here, even closer there. But this is what it says. Whether pagan or Christian, whosoever, whether man or woman, whether boy or girl, slave or free, has stolen from me, Ammianus, son of Matutina, 6 silver coins from my purse. You, lady goddess, are to exact them from him. Then the punishment sought is to reckon as the blood of him who has invoked this upon me. So they're after blood. The point about whether pagan or Christian is that the word for pagan there is gentilis, which is not how a pagan would describe themselves. It's a Christian way of describing a pagan. But at the same time, it's being offered as a contrast to Christian. So the thought is that is this therefore written by a Christian? Because it has that perspective. That's certainly possible, but it's also possible that it's just someone who likes this kind of oratorical device of using opposites. So whether man or woman, boy or girl, slave or free, is using that style. But if we go back to where that style comes from, you can pick up your Bible and go to Galatians chapter 3 and see the words of St. Paul. There is neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free, male nor female, for you're all one in Christ Jesus. So is the person who wrote this curse someone who was familiar with this text? Possibly so. The understanding what these prayers are like and the nature of pagan prayer can be a bit difficult because there aren't many prayers as such that survive. But elsewhere in the Bible, we see in Matthew a view here of what a pagan prayer was about. And this message to Christians here is saying, but when you pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathen do. So, okay, heathens use vain repetitions. For they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. So don't be like them, for your Father knoweth things ye have need of before ye ask him. So there is implying here that the Christian God actually knows what you're going to ask for anyway. so you don't need to keep doing repetition in this way. And then he goes on to give his example, and he gives the Lord's, and at which point we get the Lord's Prayer. But I suppose if you really want to understand pagan prayer, going to the Christian Bible probably isn't the best place to find out about it. It's not really going to get a sympathetic hearing there. So what you can do is go to one. And this is Marcus Cato's prayer from the 234 to 149 BC there. And if you read that, actually there isn't a lot of repetition in this. This is just a conventional prayer to Mars, seeking protection really of his farm and his estate, and asking that things be looked after and cared for. And yes, he does do sacrifice at the end, but apart from that, you could sort of top and tail this, and you'd be left with something that would probably be quite acceptable in the Church of England today, in terms of content. The one curse that is particularly interesting, really for sort of historical reasons, is this one, number 100. The fact that it is number 100 is significant. It's actually one of the original 2 curses. But when Roger Tomlin was producing the publication of the Bath curses, he gave this one the status of number 100. It's curious, partly because it's lost, but when one curse was sent to Zangermeister, this is the one that didn't go, but Edward Nicholson, who was Bodley's librarian, did have a go at translating it. And this is Roger Tomlin's drawing of from a photograph that survives in the Bodleian, even though the curse is now lost. Now, when he attempted to translate it, he published it as a letter from southern England, from Vinicius to Nigra, it was called. And this is his translation of it. And as you can see, it's assuming here that there's a Christian reference. They even get a reference to the dog of Arius, the Arian heresy appearing in here. This was an amazing thing to produce. But by 1906, when the Victoria History of the County of Somerset was produced by the relevant section on Roman Britain was written by Francis Haverfield, he wrote this: "I have carefully examined the tablet with this paper in my hand," meaning Vinicius to Nigra, "and I regret to be altogether unable to accept the interpretation given in it. Whether the scratches on the tablet represent letters at all may be doubted, but so far as I can read them into letters, they do not correspond with Mr. Nicholson's decipherment." So, quite a firm shooting down here of Bodley's librarian. Haverfield felt that it was basically an illegible or illiterate inscription. When Roger Tomlin came to look at this, because Haverfield's opinion was accepted and just sort of copied on, when Roger Tomlin came to look at it, the curse was lost, but he did have the surviving photograph to go on. And what you may not have noticed is that between when I showed the first image and this, it is now reversed, because Roger Tomlin concluded that Mr. Nicholson was actually trying to read it upside down, which could explain the difficulty. Having turned it this way round, he then produced a translation that was altogether more conventional. So this is Roger Tomlin's interpretation. And he concluded that probably Nicholson, hadn't got much familiarity with New Roman cursive, and probably Professor Hatfield hadn't encountered it much either. But this is how he translated it. And it's got this rather intriguing reference at the end to a bushel of cloud or a bushel of smoke. What on earth is that all about? Well, he does refer, he'd obviously remembered his Plautus, because he remembered a line that he drew attention to. It says that 7 nights with her are not worth 1/12 of a pint of cloud, which is the sort of thing one can imagine coming out of Plautus. But I was quite intrigued by this when I was putting this talk together the other night, so I followed that up and did a bit of maths on this, and came up with, a bushel of cloud, how big is a bushel? Well, I found one, and I must confess I had forgotten how much the volume of a bushel is. But a 1/12 of a pint for 7 nights gives you that. So a pint is would therefore give you 84 nights. So it's not worth 84 nights. The gallon is 8 times a pint, so that would be 672 nights. So she's not worth it. 672 nights on Plautus's scale. So a bushel, which is 8 gallons, gives you that, which is about 15 years. So there we are. So it's sort of slightly pointless exercise, but quite amusing, I suppose. But as one does in the late night when one goes into internet ramblings, I pursued this a little further and came across this, which is bushel. And it's another definition of bushel. It's the name of a company that manages and protects your Apple devices anytime from anywhere. And it says bushel is a cloud-based mobile device management solution. So it's quite interesting how words change their meaning over time. And indeed it may be that the cloud and smoke that is referred to in the curse from Bath may not mean quite the same thing as the cloud and smoke that Plautus had in mind. Who knows? But I thought that was quite amusing. Anyway, more seriously, going back to the curses, they do focus on theft. Now, because many of the curses are fragmentary, you don't get full text, so the fact that there are 130 doesn't mean that we've got a list of 130 stolen things. But here you can see, I've put them all together. There's the case of Vilbia, I've already discussed, which is highlighted in red. On the right are a whole list of things, coins, blankets, bathing tunics, cloaks, jewellery, bracelets, silver, another ring, a pair of gloves, all things which Roger Tomlin pointed out could have been stolen from the baths next door. And there's only just a few things that aren't. If we go to Ely, and the evidence from the curses there, a very different profile of things that are being stolen. Pretty agricultural, really, which is what you might expect. Punishments, these are the sort of punishments that are wished upon people. To lose both mind and eyes, become as liquid as water, inflict death upon them, not allow sleep or children, and so on, down that list. The blood is important as a punishment. And so here at Ely, where the curses are being thrown here into the spring in this reconstruction illustration, that's not actually their final resting place, because they do seem to have been dispersed around the site by a later development. So from that building, to the building behind it is actually where most of the curses have been found. And here is one of them from the Temple of Mercury. And this is very similar in character to the Bath ones. They're all pretty much the same. So the curses now have been registered with UNESCO as with a special status through the Memory of the World project. They're the first documents from Rome and Britain to have been given this special status. There is the potential for that to happen to other documents also in future. And it would be good to see some more Roman material from Britain getting up onto that register, I think, because it raises its profile. And certainly, since this has happened, there's been far more interest in the curses from Bath as a result of the extra publicity given to it by this Memory of the World scheme. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that splendid explanation of the context and introduction to the content